All right, Rabosai, good morning. Let us begin. Sorry, microphone over here. Let us begin by thanking our sponsors. First of all, to thank Rabbi Huda again for dedicating the Siyum this morning. Beautiful breakfast. A very special thank you. Rabosai, make sure to give a very special thank you to Saeed. He mamish is a one-man show. Is this on? Okay. He's a one-man show with this, and he's making sure that we are well fed and well taken care of, and that the Gashmios is here to support the Ruchnios. So please make sure to thank him, give him a shkayach. He really does this out of the goodness of his heart. We also thank our sponsor, our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Shvat. To thank Mrs. Bracha Strimber for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of her husband, Avraham ben Kálman Eliezer Halevi. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family in Nechama. We also thank Avi Tobias for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in appreciation for the daf, the entire chevra, the beauty of the Ribono Shel Olam's incredible Torah. And I will say, of course, we also dedicate our learning this morning as a profound hakaras hatov to the Ribono Shel Olam, that the hostage situation in Texas was resolved, Baruch Hashem, with everyone being freed, fully safe and intact and secure. Hodu LaHashem ki tov ki li'olam chasdo. It's hard to imagine that things like this happen just a few states away. I think, Sammy, can I trouble you? Can you just adjust the volume? I think it's a volume issue that we're having. Thank you. It can't be me. It must be the system. Yeah, okay, good. It's, thank you. I think maybe I touched the volume when I tried to turn it on. Testing? Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right, we'll say, so again, we thank the Ribono Shel Olam for the big miracles that he does, that we see, and we thank him for the smaller miracles that the Ribono Shel Olam performs for us each and every day that too often go unnoticed. So we'll say with that, let us begin. Today's daf is daf Dalid. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Gimel Amid Beis. A thank you to Rabbi Kálman Akiva for giving shir yesterday. And we are picking up Rabosai. Let us pick up Vahani Hilchas Saninu, 4 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, the Gemara was talking about the interesting case, or the interesting halacha, regarding the fact that 30 days prior to Shemitah, at the beginning of the calendrical Shemitah year, one already has to abstain from certain farming practices. So the Gemara wanted to highlight that this idea was a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, Sinaitic law. So the Gemara says, really? Vahani hilchas haninu? Is it really halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Kraininu. It's derived from a pasuk. After all, the Gemara says, this land, b'charish u'b'katzir tishbos. The Torah says that you shall go ahead and abstain from charish, which ultimately means plowing, and katzir, harvesting or reaping. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ein tzarech lomar charish v'katzir shel shviyis. You don't have to say that it's referring to the plowing and the harvesting of Shemitah. Sharik var ne'emar, sadcha lo sizra, the karmacha lo sizmor. Because the pasuk already says explicitly by Shemitah that what? That you're not supposed to sow your field, and you are not supposed to go ahead and harvest your vineyard. Elo chorish shel erev shviyas, top of Dalid, shenichnas l'shviyas. Rather, Rabbi Akiva says the pasuk, which otherwise would be extraneous, must be coming to teach us the following halacha. When the Torah says b'chorish u'b'katzir tishbos, which Rabbi say, although technically speaking the pasuk is referring to Shabbos, the pasuk is referring to Shabbos. Halacha l'maisi here, we are applying it to Shemitah. So Rabbi Akiva says, if it's not necessary to teach me the ikar halachas of Shemitah, it must be coming to teach me something different. It must be coming to teach me charish shel erev shviyas, top of Dalid, shenichnas l'shviyas. It must be coming to teach me that certain plowing that is done on erev Shemitah, going into the Shemitah year, and katzir shel shviyas, shiyatz l'matzeh shviyas, and for that matter, things that you harvest on the Shemitah year going into the 8th year retain their kedusha. So we'll say, look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, shenichnas l'shviyas, kol sheyesh lo likanis l'shviyas, sha'asha lachros lifnei Rosh Hashanah. Say, Rabbi Akiva understands that this extra phrase is coming to teach me that there are certain agricultural activities which are going to be prohibited on Erev Shemitah going into Shemitah. Now, why would you go ahead and prohibit certain activities Erev Shemitah going into Shemitah? Because halacha l'maisa, the real impact of those agricultural activities will be for a benefit on the Shemitah year itself. Therefore, the Torah prohibits it. The same way that produce that is harvested during the Shemitah year, or produce that grows during the Shemitah year for that matter, will have Shemitah sanctity even if it's not actually harvested until year number 8. Good. So we'll say, that's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel says, no. Ma charish rishos, af katzir rishos. Rabbi Shmuel says that just like in the pasuk, charish, things that you are harvesting, we're talking about plowing. Just like plowing is a rishos. In other words, there's no mitzvah rabosai associated with plowing. Af katzir rishos. So too, again, the type of things for which you are liable. Sorry. Sorry. So Rabbi Shmuel says like this: Ma charish rishus, just like ultimately again charish, charisha, which is hoeing. There is no plowing. There is no mitzvah associated with that. We'll see what that means in just a moment. So too, af katzir rishus. So too, what type of harvesting is prohibited? The type of harvesting that's prohibited is non-mitzvah harvesting. What does that come to exclude? Yatsa ketzir haomer shehi mitzvah. This comes to exclude the harvesting of the barley for karban haomer, which is of mitzvah importance. I will say now. Let's look at Rashi for just a moment to make sense of this. Rashi says ketzira omer l'ktzar b'Shabbos. I will say now. I want to show you what's happening over here. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael are really fundamentally arguing not just on the drasha of the pasuk, but what the pasuk is referring to. You see, Rabbi Akiva is using this pasuk b'charish shabakazar tishbos to teach me about Shemitah. Specifically, what he's using it to teach me is that halacha l'maisa, the prohibition to farm the land, begins before Shemitah, i.e. 30 days, and ultimately, again, the sanctity of Shemitah produce extends to things that won't even be harvested until year number 8. Rabbi Yishmael is saying, no, the pasuk is talking about Shabbos. It's Shabbos, which, by the way, is the context of the pasuk. Sheishes yamin tavod ubiyom hashi tishbos b'charish v'katra tishbos. Rabbi Yishmael is saying it's talking about prohibitions of Shabbos. What is it talking about? It's actually here to tell you that the only type of hoeing or plowing and harvesting that's prohibited on Shabbos are things that are not related to mitzvahs. Now, Bosai, you never have a situation of plowing that is a mitzvah. But you do have a case of harvesting, which is a mitzvah, which is when? Karban Omer. The halacha is on the second day of Pesach. You have to go ahead, second night of Pesach. We go ahead and we cut down barley. We offer that up as the Karban Omer. Karban Omer is incredibly important because it allows for the consumption of Chadash. It allows for the consumption of new produce. Any produce that grew between the last Pesach and this Pesach, you need Karban Omer to permit that. Rabbi Shmuel says the pasuk comes to teach you that the harvesting of the Karban Omer is permitted even on Shabbos. Even on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Ela Amrav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. So therefore, I will say this was a long way of going ahead and asking a fundamental question, which is the Gemara in yesterday's daf wanted to show that the halacha that you can't farm your field 30 days before Shemitah was a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Here the Gemara is showing that it's not a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. What is it? It's a pasuk. So what's going on over here? Ela Amrav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Ki Gemiri Hilchasa. Boss, I just want to tell you the beauty of learning these Gemaras. Although I know I've heard from a couple of you that you're having a little bit of a hard transition from the days of Tainus and Megillah into the days of Moed Katan. Right, we're back into Sugyas and Gemaras. But just understand, we're zoche to learn a Gemara about Shemitah in Eretz Yisrael during a Shemitah year. So what we want more than anything is to be in Eretz Yisrael. That's really what we want. To ultimately truly be observing Shemitah. But the next best thing to being in Eretz Yisrael is learning Torah's Eretz Yisrael. So what is chus for these couple of moments that we're together, we're learning these sugyas, we're actually in Eretz Yisrael. We're actually experiencing the Shemitah, we're actually experiencing Kiddush HaSa'aretz. So it might be a little bit technical, but our neshamas are so grateful for the opportunity to be transported to Artzinu HaKidosha. So the Gemara goes weiter. So how do you answer this? Listen to this. L'mishrei Yolda. Interesting. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is there to teach us something different. It's there l'mishrei Yolda. Now, what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Hilchasa l'mishrei Yolda. Remember again, we saw there's another interesting halacha, which is if you have 10 saplings. Remember, we saw this in yesterday's daf. We've actually seen this a number of times throughout our journeys through Shas. This idea that 10 saplings in an area of a base sa'ah. So the Gemara says if you don't take care of that ratio to ground, tree to ground ratio, ultimately everything will die. It represents a davar ha'avid, something which will be lost. So therefore, Nachman Yitzchak says like this: the halacha Moshe Misinai tells you that you're allowed to go ahead and take care of Esrei Netios up until Rosh Hashanah. See, remember again, during Shemitah, whether you're going to suffer a loss or not suffer a loss, you can't work the land. There are certain things you could do, which we'll discuss, but Lemaisa, the halacha of Esrei Netios tells you that you are allowed to take care of those saplings right up until Rosh Hashanah of the Shemitah year. So the Gemara says, so Kroi Lemeisar Zekena. The Psukim come to say that halacha Lemaisa, you are not permitted to go ahead and take care of older trees. What does this mean? So we'll say this is very interesting. For the halacha of 10 saplings in a Beis Sa'ah, which is what we'll call a very sensitive or precarious agricultural setup, where if you don't take care of those saplings, they will die, you are allowed to work that land up until Rosh Hashanah of Shemitah. But if you have older, more established trees, then the prohibition to work the land begins 30 days before Rosh Hashanah of the Shemitah year. And we're using, so the halacha Moshe Misinai teaches me the laws of the 10 saplings, and ultimately again the Psukim come to answer any other case and tell you that you have to stop working the land 30 days before the Shemitah year. So as such, we use both the Psukim as well as the halacha Moshe Misinai. Beautiful. So that says the Gemara El Hilchos of Rabbi Yishmael. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. The Mishri Yalda Krai LaMeiser Zekena. The Kevan the Hilchos the Mishri Yalda Lav Memela Zekena Asira. So it says the Gemara, but I don't understand. If you're using Psukim to teach me, if you're using halacha Moshe Misinai to teach me that you're allowed to take care of the 10 saplings, what we call the Yalda, the 10 young saplings, up until Rosh Hashanah, that you're allowed to work that land right up until Rosh Hashanah. Lav Mamela Zekina Asira. Sirabosai, if you need a halacha Moshe Misinai to teach you that you can go ahead and work the land of the saplings up until Rosh Hashanah, can't we just automatically infer from that the prohibition upon everything else begins 30 days earlier? Rather, Rabbi Rabbi, you have to say that in fact you're right. It's that according to Rabbi Yishmael, ultimately he learns out the din of the prohibition of farming beginning 30 days before the Shemitah year. He learns out from halacha Moshe Misinai, and Rabbi Akiva is going to learn it out from Psukim. So therefore, Rabbi, interestingly enough, everyone is going to subscribe to the same halacha, namely that in almost all situations, the prohibition on farming prior to Shemitah, or I should say, the prohibition of farming on Shemitah, actually begins 30 days before Shemitah. There are certain exceptions to that rule, but that's the general rule. The machlokes is, interesting enough, there's no machlokes on halacha. What's the machlokes? Where do you learn it out from? Do we learn it out from a halacha Moshe Misinai, or do we learn it out from Psukim? For Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Rabbi Gamliel Beis Dino Midaraisa Batla Lahu, my timer. So let's say, so 1 second. Now let's go back for just a moment. Look at Rashi. Midaraisa Batlu Kilomar Ashke Chusmach Minator Lachi Batlu Chasa. And I remember again, we saw earlier that in fact, in earlier iterations of the Shemitah law, they were in fact prohibiting farming from Shemitah even earlier. Right? Even earlier, back to Pesach in year number 6, back to Shavuos in year number 6. But Rabbi Gamliel and his Beis Din were mevatel this. So says the Gemara, my taima, Gomer Shabbos, Gomer Shabbos, Mishabbos Bereshis. They made a Gzeira Shava of Shabbos by Shemitah, from Shabbos Bereshis. How so? Listen to this. This is fascinating. So I'll say ultimately again. So when it comes to regular Shabbos, right? When it comes to regular Shabbos, hi asura. Shabbos itself is asur b'malacha. Lefaneha ula achareha mutarin. They both say again, regular Shabbos, regular weekday Shabbos, right? Weekly Shabbos. So you can't do malacha on Shabbos. Can you do malacha before Shabbos? Yes. Can you do malacha after Shabbos? Yes. So to Afkan, so to by Shemitah, Avhi asura. Shemitah is asur. Lefaneha ula achareha mutarin. But before Shemitah and after Shemitah ultimately are mutter. So that was Rabbi Gamliel's Beis Din's logic for being mevatel these additional Shemitah prohibitions. So it says the Gemara Maskef Ravashi Man Da'amar Hilchasa. So I don't understand. Let's say if you understand that the concept that the concept of adding time before Shemitah to the prohibition of Shemitah, whether it's 30 days or like we saw in other iterations, back to Pesach or Shavuos, if you hold that is a halacha la Moshe Sinai, so the Gemara says, Mandam hilchasa, asya gzera shava, akra hilchasa, umandam kra, asya gzera shava akra ka. Both say, what did we just get finished saying? We just got finished saying that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel both agree that what? This is very exciting. Both agree that what? That halacha l'maisa, the prohibition to farm land 30 days before the start of calendrical Shemitah is asur what? Midoraisa. What was the machlokes? Where do you get it from? It says it a pasuk, it is a halacha l'moshe misiyam, but either way, everyone's agreeing. So I'll say, if everyone is agreeing, how could Rabbi Gamliel and his Beis Din come along and say, and essentially uproot the Isser? And how are they uprooting the Isser? How are they uprooting an Isser? With a Gzer Shava. Whoever heard of such a thing like this? You have a halacha l'moshe misinai, or you have an Isser da'araisa, and you're bringing a Gzer Shava of Shabbos and uprooting biblical law? Where do you get that from? We don't do that. So we'll say, watch this. Ella, this is incredible. Elam Ravashi, Rabbi Gamliel Beis Dino, Savrlek Rabbi Shmuel, Damar Hilchasa Gemirila. So we'll say, watch this. Really, Rabbi Gamliel and his Beis Din hold like Rabbi Shmuel hold that the prohibition to farm 30 days before Shemitah is really halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Watch this. V'chi Gemiri Hilchasa Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash Kayim Dumya Deniso Chamayim Aval Bizman Shein Beis HaMikdash Kayim Lo. Wow. We'll say, here we go. That even if you hold that there is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai only applies when? When the Beis HaMikdash stands. But when the Beis HaMikdash is no longer standing, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai no longer applies. Now Shemitah could still apply, and even biblical Shemitah could still apply. But halacha l'maisa, biblical Shemitah by itself without the halacha l'Moshe Sinai only says that's what's aser? First of Tishrei, right, Rosh Hashanah of Shemitah, till the end of Elul. That's Shemitah. The halacha l'Moshe Sinai came along and added 30 days before that. But when is the halacha l'Moshe Sinai intact? Only when the Beis HaMikdash stands. I will say, take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Ki Gemiri Hilchasa, almost right across in Rashi. Ki Gemiri Hilchasa, Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash Kayim. Chishar Rabbi Gamliel Beis Dino, Bizmano She'ein Beis HaMikdash Kayim. I will say, fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So therefore, again, I will say, what comes out, it sounds like comes out from the end of the sugya is, everyone is going to agree that halacha l'maisa, biblical Shemitah by itself, begins at Rosh Hashanah. There's either a halacha l'Moshe Sinai or a pasuk or sakra that teaches us that we extend the prohibition to when? To 30 days before. Now I will say, now here is the problem. We know, what else do we know? We know that Rabbi Gamliel and his Beis Din came along and essentially suspended the additional 30 days prior to calendrical Shemitah. Now I will say, now just understand, that only works according to the opinion that says the 30 days are what? Are halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Because we'll say the 30 days are a pasuk. You can't uproot that. A pasuk is a pasuk, and it applies at all times. But apparently Rabbi Gamliel and his Beis Din felt that the extra 30 days was a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and they also felt that kind of built in to the halacha l'Moshe Sinai is that it only applies when the Beis HaMikdash stands. But if the Beis HaMikdash is not standing, then unfortunately, then Shemitah is only based on a calendrical year with no Tosefes. Incredible. So I will say back to the Mishnah. So we'll say back to the Mishnah. Incredible Gemaras. Back to Mishnah. So remember again, the Mishnah was talking about what kind of field you're allowed to water on Chalamayid. What kind of field? Good. You call that Beis HaShalchin. Right? Beis HaShalchin. Right? So I'll say, so you can only water an irrigated field on Chalamayid. But remember again, let's review. Why are you allowed to water an irrigated field? The Beis HaShalchin on Chalamayid. Why? Right? Hefsid. Right? Because it's going to be a loss. But however, even in the realm of loss, you're precluded from what? Tircha Yisera, too much effort. So along the examples of Tircha Yisera, the Gemara said, Avalomi me gisham lo me kilon. You can't water a Beis HaShalchin from rainwater. We're not exactly sure what that means. We'll see what that means. And mea kilo. Mea kilo means from a well. From a well. So it says the Gemara, Bishlama me kilon ikatircha yisera. Now I will say, I totally get it. I understand why you can't irrigate, why you can't water a beis hashalchin from a well. I will say, why? What's going to happen if you start watering a field from a well? Right? The whole day, what are you going to be doing? Drawing water. Right? In other words, that's crazy. That's an incredible amount of effort. I understand that. I will say, but I don't understand. What does it mean? Rainwater? I don't know. Rainwater sounds like it kind of happens by itself. So what exactly is the problem with rainwater? To which the Gemara is supposed to listen to this. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Gezerah me geshamim atu me kilo. There's a gezerah. Both say, listen to this. Both say, when we speak about rainwater, what are we talking about? We're talking about a pool of rainwater. A pool of rainwater. So the first opinion says, you know why you can't use a pool of rainwater? Because we're concerned that if we let you use a pool of rainwater, what's going to happen? You're going to end up what? Using a well. Because they're both kind of the same thing. They're both a collection of water. So if we allow you to water the field through collected rainwater, you're going to come to go ahead and use the well. Rav Ashi says, no, me gishamim gufayhu lidei me kilon asu. So let's listen to this. Rav Ashi says, no, the concern is that rainwater will become like a well. Okay, now what does that mean? Look at Rashi. It's actually fascinating. Gisham nami asu de mekilon, kilon arki madlumine delo havya malaya nasis mamela mekilon she'eno malay v'tircha milsa. So we'll say, listen to this. So the second opinion says, we'll say, what's going to happen with rainwater? At a certain level, at a certain point, the collected rainwater is going to reach, the level's going to drop, and the water won't flow freely. As a result, what's going to happen? You're going to end up bucketing. I don't know if that's the right verb. Right? You're going to end up bucketing out water, which essentially is the same issue that we have with a well. So we'll say, so it's actually interesting over because they're saying something very similar. So the first opinion says you can't use collected rainwater out of a concern that if we let you use rainwater, you'll come to draw water from a well. The second opinion says, no, you can't use collected rainwater because ultimately that situation will turn into a situation of a well. So says the Gemara, the kamiflegi b'Rabbi Zera. And both said the point of contention would be the position of Rabbi Zera. Dam Rabbi Zera, Amar Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah, Amar Shmuel, Naros hamoshchin, mayin min ha'agam. Listen to this case. So I will say, if you have rivers, now really it means like streams of water, which pull water from ponds. So they're fed min agam. Agam is a pond, a large pond. So they draw water from the ponds. Mutar lashkos mehen b'chalosh hamoed. So you're permitted to go ahead and water the fields from these streams on Chalamayid. So listen to this. Mar islei Rabbi Zera, umar lesei Rabbi Zera. So both say one of these opinions would agree with Rabbi Zera, and one would not agree with Rabbi Zera. They both say, how so? See, interestingly enough, we allow you to go ahead and use these streams, even though they're fed by a pond. And what? We're not concerned that maybe the pond is going to dry up and you may come to go ahead and bucket out water from that area. Or for that matter, go and draw water from a well. So the Gemara says one of the opinions would hold like this, one of the opinions would reject this. Okay, that's an afkamino. So Gufa Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Bar Yirmiyah, Amar Shmuel, both a second wide line. Naros hamoshchin mayim min agamim. So let's listen to this. So we just said before. So you have rivers, again, streams is a better term. You have streams that are pulling water. They're being fed from larger ponds. So the halacha is that you're permitted to go ahead and water a field with, obviously, what kind of field? An irrigated field, right? On Chalamayid. Says Rabbi Zera, but how can you do this? We'll say, isn't this the same case as collected rainwater and as a well? In other words, I will say, it would seem that based on the Mishnah, halacha lamaisa, you're not allowed to use a pooled water source on Chalamayid. Right? That seems to be the issue. Either, again, because it'll lead you to use a well, or ultimately, again, because it may dry up or drop below a certain level. And either way, there's a tircha. So how are you allowed to use these streams that are fed by a standing water source? To which the Gemara says, no. Amalei Yirmiyah Berei Hanya Gam de Bavel Kemayim de la Paski Dami. Both say the ponds of Bavel, they are like sources of water that do not dry up. In other words, we'll say apparently, remember in general, Bavel never had a problem with rain, right? Bavel was very well saturated. So apparently these ponds are considered to be like an inexhaustible water source, and therefore there's no concern that using them may lead you to come to a well-like situation. Beautiful. We'll say a couple of more halachas regarding water sources. First of all, we'll say also the notebooks for Moed Katan are here. I see you're taking notes. Beautiful, right? So the notebooks for Moed Katan are here also. Please take advantage of them. So Tan Rabbanon, hapsikos v'habrechos shenismal ma'am be'erev Yom Tov. So listen to this. So psikos and brechos. What are psichos and brechos? Rashi says over here, chada milsi. It's the same thing. These are pools. Right, pools that are used to collect water. Shenis malamai me'erev Yom Tiv. So let's say again, these pools filled with water on Erev Yom Tiv. Asr lahashkos mehen b'chol shamoid. You are not permitted to go ahead and use them to water a field on Cholamoid. V'mhaisa amas hamayim overes beinehen mutar. But ultimately, again, if there is a stream, or I should say a channel of water that goes between them, ultimately, again, you are permitted. But take a look at Rashi. What's going on over here? Look at Rashi. Im amas hamayim overes beinehen ben abrechos halalu mutar lahashkos megishamim da'i paski megishamim mashka me'amas hamayim. So we'll say, interestingly enough, the halach is like this. If you have pools of water that were filled with water in Erev Yom Tiv, now normally we would say you're not allowed to use that. Why? Because there's a general prohibition of using a standing, static body of water out of a concern that either it'll turn into a well situation or it'll lead you to draw water from a well. What the Gemara is adding in over here is as follows. If you have a channel of water that kind of runs between that, so there's another water source that runs between those pools, you can go ahead and use the water from the pools. Why? Because what's the worst case scenario? If the pools dry up or the pools drop below a certain level, you still have the channel that is bringing water from elsewhere, and therefore it's permitted. Beautiful. That's provided that the majority of the field is watered from the water that comes from the channel and not from the standing pools. Good. Rav Ashi Amar, Afa pi she'en ruba sha'os asad shoseh, kevan de kamash chava asya, meima Amar ilo shasya lechad yoma, tishte litrei ul tlasa yoma. So Rav Ashi comes along and says, no, even if the majority of the field is not watered by the channel, it still is okay. Why? Because what's the worst case scenario? Even if halacha lamaisa, the standing pools dry up, and the field doesn't get water for one day, the owner says it's okay. The field doesn't have to get watered every single day. So even if it doesn't get watered on one day because let's say the pool's dried up, ultimately the channel will bring water from elsewhere and it'll get water on days 2 and 3. Beautiful. Tanrabanan. Bracha shenotefes mayim misaderes hashalchin zu. So it's another interesting case. So let's say you have a pool. Bracha is a pool. Shenotefes mayim mistei beis hashalchin. That ultimately goes ahead and draws water or provides water to one irrigated field. Mutar lashkos mimena sada beis hashalchin acheres. Shabbos say you're allowed to take water from a pool that sustains one beis hashalchin and channel it into a second beis hashalchin. Okay, so what's going on over here? So I take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi's right in the last 2 short lines. Brecha shenotefes sada beis hashalchin zu mutar lashkos mimena beis hashalchin acher. Beis hashalchin. Shabbos say here's the case. Beis hashalchin shigavoa v'haya mayon novea mitzido u'betzad echad haya beis hashalchin namuch u'bein elu beis hashalchin haya betzad shalchin. So here's the case. You have 2 irrigated fields, but one of them is higher than the other. So what you can do is you could channel water from the upper field to go into the lower field. That's the case over here. The case here is Tarabana Brecha Shenotefes Mai Misada Beis Hashalchin Zu Mutar Lahashkos Yenes Sada Beis Hashalchin Acheres. Sa'ai the Gemara. But one second, Va'avida de Pascha. But one second, aren't we concerned about say we seem to be going back and forth because aren't we concerned in general about using any standing pool of water that it may what? That it may dry up? On Rabbi Yirmiyah, Va'adayin Hi Mitaftefes. What's the case? Look at Rashi. We'll say 4th wide line. Adayim mitaftefes. Mibeis hashachin gavoa l'socha brecha devadei lo paska. We're talking about a situation where we see that there's enough water in the pool. It's dripping down into the lower field. It's not going to dry up. Amar Abaye v'hu shelo pasak mayon rishon. That is true as long as the initial spring which is feeding the pool, has not dried up. Look at Rashi. Amra Baivu Shlo Pasak Mayon Hamitafteif Mi Beis Hashachin Gavol LeBrecha Mutlashkos Mi Brechas LeBeis Hashachin Namuch Avali Pasak Mayon Afish. I will say, as long as the water source has not dried up, you could continue to go ahead and divert water into the lower field. Good. Tanya Amar Shem Benasya Shtei Abos. Another interesting case. Shtei Arugos Zu Lamala Mizu. I will say, now in this case, let's say you have, aruga is just a bed, right? Or literally a row. So imagine you have a row of produce, right? One row on top of another row. Lo yidla min ha'tachtona v'yishkes halyona. You should not take water from the lower row and use it to go ahead and sustain the upper row. So I just want to point out, so you see, it's interesting how you see like the evolution of halacha in this. The way this halacha started, before we get to this, the way this halacha started is, pretty much, what's the halacha with standing bodies of water? Brechos, what's the halacha? Megishamim, what's the halacha? Can't use it, right? That's the way the Mishnah kind of started, right? Because remember again, the Mishnah said even by an irrigated field, you can't water it with well water and you can't water it with rainwater. Any standing body of water. Why? What's the concern? So again, well water, what's the concern? Tircha Yisera. Standing pools of water, what's the concern? Right? Essentially, it'll become like a well. Right? Either, again, you'll come to use the well, or it's going to turn into a well when the water level dips below a certain level. You're going to have to start bucketing out water. What you do begin to see, Rabbi, is that halacha is then modified. How is it modified? In cases where we're confident that the pool is not going to dry up, we let you use it. Examples of that, Rabbi, are Bavel, where apparently certain pools in Bavel, it was clear that it's not going to dry up. Or again, this case that we just had before, the upper field and the lower field. So you begin to see in situations where we're confident that there is ample water supply, you can use standing bodies of water to irrigate or to water an irrigated field on Chalamai. So just an interesting case. So now another halacha. Watch this case. This is great. But let's say again, one farm, right? Well, I have two, we'll call it two rows, right? Two rows of produce. One is higher, one is lower. What's the halacha? Lo yidla min ha'tachtona v'yishkes halyona. You can't take from the lower one in order to go ahead and water the upper one. Now what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. Lo yidla min ha'tachton v'yesh, like second to last line, right? So you can't take water. So just imagine this case, right? Just based on the laws of gravity, right? Where is water going to pool? Right? By the lower bed. I can't take water from the lower bed to go ahead and water the upper bed, the higher bed. Why not? That's just very simple. Why not? Why not? Tircha. Remember again, although on Chalamai, you are allowed to do work in order to stave off hefsed meruba, significant loss, you cannot do it if it's significant tircha. So again, one of the difficult things we have to figure out is how do you define what's significant. Remember, the lashon of the Gemara is not tircha, it's ultimately, again, tircha yisera, right? Because in all work, there's an element of tircha, there's an element of effort, right? What's asran chalamayim is tircha yisera. So the Gemara says the act of taking water from the lower bed to the upper bed, that's ultimately tircha yisera. So the Gemara says, Lo yidla min ha'tachtona v'yishka es halyona. Yes, Yosrad Kain, Amr Belazar Bar Shimon, Afilu, listen to this, Aruga achos, Chatzia namach v'chatzia gavoa, Lo yidla mimakom namoch v'yishka l'makom gavoa. Rabbi say furthermore again, Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon says halacha l'maisa. That's what, even if one bed, right, one row of produce, but let's say the produce is planted on a slant. So you have part of the row that is higher and part of the row that is lower. You can't take water from the lower part of the row ultimately to the higher part of the row. We'll say you might have thought that this halacha only applies to two independent rows. But one row is one row. Halacha l'maisa, no. Even in one row, you can't take part from the lower part of the row, in the same row, and go ahead and water the upper part of the row. So the Gemara says, incredible. So the Gemara says, We'll say, just by the way, I'll point out, there's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor in all of this. We'll say, Mayim, see in all of these cases, right, the water is pooling on the bottom, right, because that's the way water works. So we'll say, water also represents Torah. also represents Torah. So the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says that water always gravitates, right, quite literally to the lowest point. If a person wants to be Kona Torah, person wants to acquire Torah, wants to acquire the beautiful, thirst-quenching waters of Torah, person has to humble themselves. Water always travels to the lowest point. Person wants Torah, humility, which I will say makes sense. Because without humility, see, if a person doesn't have humility, a person is arrogant. Arrogant people know everything. They have nothing to learn. There's no place to grow. I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm doing exactly what I need to do. There's nothing more for me to accomplish. It's only with humility. And I will say sometimes, see, when we think about, just very quickly, when we think about humility, we often have a little bit of a warped sense of humility. We often think that humility means, I'm nothing. I'm nothing. When a person thinks that they're nothing, I will say, that's not humility. That's a lack of sense of self. That's an avera to think you're a nothing. Rabbi Nachman says the worst avera is to think you're a nothing. Because when a person thinks that they're a nothing, then they leave the door open to doing anything. If I think I'm a nothing, then I might as well do anything. Humility doesn't mean thinking I'm a nothing. Humility means I know what I am, Baruch Hashem, and I do a lot of good things, and I have a lot of good, but I also know that I could be doing so much more. I also know that I could, as great as I am, as happy as I am with my accomplishments, for every one thing I have accomplished, there's 10 more things I can be doing. For every good midah I have, there's another 5 I could acquire. For every mesechta I finished, there's 3 more that I could be doing. For every tzedakah that I've given, there's so much more. Every chesed, that's what humility means. I recognize the good, but I also take the good as a mechayev for all the greater things that I could be accomplishing in life. And here the Gemara tells us, water always flows to the lowest place. Torah always flows to the lowest place. Torah, accomplishment, greatness in Torah comes to those who are able to inculcate within themselves the great midah of humility. Incredible. Another interesting case. I'll say it's also fascinating. We learn these sugyas, and for us, they're like, okay, that's interesting, but I don't really know what to do with it. Let's say, once upon a time, and still in agricultural societies, these halachas, this is the bread and butter of living. So listen to this case. Madlin li yarakos kedei la'ochlan. So we'll say, we're not exactly sure what this means yet. Rashi says what it sounds like is that halacha lamaisa, you could draw water in order to water vegetables. So that you should have them to eat on Yom Tiv. Madlin li yarakos kedei la'ochlan. V'mishir le'avosan aser. But if it's to go out and beautify the vegetables, you can't draw the water. Okay. Ravina v'Rabba Tosfa. So let's listen to this. So Ravina and Rabba were walking. They saw a man who was drawing water. Rashi says, last Rashi in the daf, David Dala Davla, Dole Delios Maim Lirakos. So we'll say, listen to this. So they saw a man who was drawing buckets of water to apparently water his vegetables. Amar le Rabba Tosfa Ravina. Rabba said to Ravina, Le Seimar L'Shamte. Let's put this guy in Cherem. Right? After all, what is he doing? He's drawing water. You're not allowed to draw water with a bucket on Chalamai. That's Tircha Yisera. So Amarle, Vatanya Madlin Lirakos Kedei La'ochlan. But he said to him, but one second, didn't we just learn that? We learned that the halacha is that you could draw water in a bucket in order to go ahead and put water on vegetables in order to eat them. Amarle, Mi Savris, my Madlin, Maya. No. You think Madlin means drawing water? Madlin doesn't mean drawing water. What does Madlin mean? My Madlin, Abba say, Amadeus. My Madlin shalufe. What it means, Abba say, is you could pull out vegetables. Madlin means you could pull vegetables out of the ground. Now, what does that mean? Look at Rashi. Rashi says over here something amazing. Shalufe, kishayirakos ritzufen. When vegetables are growing very closely together in the ground, notel mehen mi b'nei sayim. Lo'ochlan mutter li'afos. I'm sorry. Lo'ochlan mutter li'afosan aser b'shvil she'afosan aser. Listen to this. So halacha l'maisa, if you have vegetables that are growing in very close proximity to each other, so sometimes what has to happen is you have to pull out some of them in order to allow the rest to grow well. So in chalama you're allowed to do that as long as you're going to eat whatever it is that you're pulling out. So in other words, I could so to speak kill 2 birds with 1 stone, right? I could go ahead and pull out the carrot. I'm going to eat the carrot, and I'm also benefiting the stuff that's growing. That's okay as long as I'm going to eat the carrots. If the only reason I'm pulling out the carrots is why to enable the stuff that's growing to go ahead and grow better, the Rabbi said that's harvacha, that's profit. That's profit. You're not allowed to do that on Chalamayit, right? You could do malacha for the sake of ochel. Remember, Rabbi said this isn't even a case of hefsid. This is a case of I'm eating the carrots. So I'm allowed to do malacha on Chalamayit. I'm allowed to do malacha on Yom Tiv for the sake of ochel nefesh, right? I'm not allowed to pull carrots out of the ground on Yom Tiv, but on Chalamayit, I would be permitted to go ahead and do that, as long as again I'm going to eat the carrots. Even though the side benefit of my pulling the carrots out of the ground is I'm benefiting the stuff that's there. So therefore again he said to him, when the Mishnah said before, Madlin is Hayarakos, we thought Madlin meant you could draw buckets of water to water vegetables on Chalamayit. That's not what it means. It's not what it means. Madlin means you could pull carrots out of the ground. If you're going to, I'm using carrots, it's going to be cool. Vegetables out of the ground, if you're going to eat the vegetables, even though the side benefit is to the vegetation that remains in the ground, that it could grow better now that it has a bit more space. Kid, it's not as we learned. What's a fascinating case? As we learned, Hamedal begifanim, kishem shu medal b'shalo, kachu medal b'shalanim. Listen to this. So medal begifanim is the same case. This is where you have vines. And let's say you have too many vines growing in too close of a proximity to each other. So what's the halacha? This is fascinating. So Hamedal begifanim, when you're pulling out vines, in order to allow more vines to grow, kishem shu medal b'shalo, the same way that you could go and remove vines by your own vines, you could do the same thing. Rabbi say, let's say I have part of my vineyard that's peah. So Rabbi say that doesn't belong to me, right? Peah is the corner you leave for the poor. So let's say I have a corner of my vineyard that's peah. So the shaila is, am I allowed to pull out vines from that corner? Now, why am I pulling out vines? Why am I doing it? I'm doing it to enable the rest of the vines to grow better. But technically speaking, that's not my corner of the field, right? But that belongs to the Aniyim. Rabbi Huda says the same way that you can pull out vines on your field, you can pull out vines for the Aniyim as well. Rabbi Meir Omer b'shalo rashay ve'en rashay b'shal Aniyim. Rabbi Meir says, no, only thing you're allowed to do, Rabbi says, you can work your own field. The peah field, leave it alone. Leave it alone. What's going to happen will happen, but leave it alone. And I will say, so again, we're not getting into the machlokes, but the point over here is you see the lashon of meidel. I will say meidel, even though it's the same lashon of dola, to draw water, but meidel means what? To pull out vegetation, or to pull out something that is growing from the ground. Incredible. Amar leva tanya madlin mayim liyirakos kedei la'ochlan. Shabbos, but he said back to him, but 1 second. There's a braisa, and the braisa says you're allowed to draw water. You're allowed to draw water in order to go ahead and water the vegetables. Amarle, itanya tanya. Here's son, look, if that's what it says, that's what it says. Right? Shabbos says, so again, what he said to him, look, that's not the Masorah I have, but if you have a brisa that actually reads that way, then ultimately, again, I stand corrected. So Shabbos says, halacha l'maisa. So again, it sounds like over here that some level. Well, we'll see what the halacha l'maisa is with this. We'll come back to vegetables in just a moment. But understand, we're leaving off with two versions of the vegetable discussion. Version 1 has you can't draw water for the vegetables in the same way you can't draw water in general, right? But rather, what can you do? What does madlin mean? Madlin means ultimately you can pull out vegetables, even as long as I'm going to eat the vegetables that I am pulling out of the ground. As long as, even though the side benefit is going to be, I'm benefiting the vegetables that are still growing in the earth. Possibility number 2 is that no, I can actually draw water in order to water vegetables on Chalamayit. Again, that's the machlokes. Hold on to that. We'll see resolution on that in tomorrow's daf in Meretz Hashem. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, you'll see why I'm leaving vegetables on the side for just a moment. Vein osin ugios legifanim. Also the Mishnah said, you can't make ugios for the vines. My ugios. What are ugios? Says the Gemara. Amr Yehuda banchi. Ugios are banchi. Rashi says boros tachas hagifanim v'zeisim and osim b'hen mayim. So we'll say, so ugios are like furrows around the vine. So we'll say, if you could imagine, you make a circle, a furrow around the vine, and the goal is you fill up that furrow with water. So it's called ugios, ag uga. Uga is a circle, right? Ag uga, right? Choni made a circle. So there's a circle around the vine that ultimately you would fill up with water. Elohein ugios bedidin shebeikre zeisim ubesheikre gefanim. These are the bedidin, which once again, same lashon bedidin. These are the circles that one makes around olive trees, or that one makes around grapevines. The Gemara says, "Ini v'harav Yehuda shara libnei bar tzisai lemei avid banchi lekarmehen." But 1 second, Rabbi Huda did allow the people of Bar Tzisai to make these furrows around their vines and around their vines or around their olive trees. So, but the Mishnah said it's asur. Lokasha habecharati haba'atiki. Arba said, listen to this. It depends. When Rabbi Huda allowed it, these were brand new plants, brand new vines. And if you did not go ahead and make the furrows and allow the water to pool there, what would happen? They would die. So because they would die, ultimately that represents a hefsid meruba, and that's why it's going to be mutter. But halacha l'maisa, in any other case, it will remain aser. Beautiful. Look at Rashi. Ha b'charati shemi olam lo hayu sham ugios aser lasos b'chalav shal moed. If there were never ugios there beforehand, you can't make them on chalav moed. Dikatirch yisera avalatiki shekvar hayu lo sham ugios. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. I said just the opposite. Excuse me. I was saying, when is it aser? When is it aser? It's aser b'charati. When the ugios were never there, you can't make them for the first time around the vine. But if halacha l'maisa they were there, but rather some earth just fell into it, you're allowed to clear it out on chalamayit. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So habacharati haba'atiki. The isra of the Mishnah is you can't make a brand new batch of ugiot, right? You cannot make a brand new batch, right, of going ahead and making the furrows around. But if they were already there, atiki, but some earth fell into it, you can dig it back out on chalamayit. Incredible. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer ein osin ha'ama. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said you can't make a channel. Can't make a channel on chalamayit. So we'll say, well, he said on chalamayit and on shmita. So we're going to get into a great sugya now. Bishlama moed mishum de katarach. I understand chalamayit you can't do it. Why? Because there's tircha yisera, right? Making a channel is tircha. Ela shvius. My timer, but why can't you make a channel on Shemitah? Says the Gemara, Pligu bar Rabbi Zever, Rabbi Abba bar Mamo. First wide line. Number one, Chad Amar Ibnei Shnira Ka'oder, one said that it's going to be aser because it looks like plowing or hoeing. Specifically, the Chad Amar Ibnei Machshir Agapel Israel. Listen to this. The other opinion says, because I will say, when you dig a channel, watch this is fascinating. When you dig a channel, what do you have to do? Dig, right? What happens when you dig? You take earth from one spot and you put it on the side. So I will say, what are you doing? You see now the sides of the channel are filled with loose earth. Because they're filled with loose earth, therefore what? That makes it ready for planting. So I will say, so listen to this. So therefore, everyone's agreeing you can't take a channel on chalamayit because it's tircha yisera. You can't do it on shmita, why not? One opinion says because it looks like you're hoeing. The second opinion says you're mamish readying earth for planting. Because now you have loose earth on the sides of the channel. So my ben Abba says second wide line on Dalam Abayz. What's the practical difference between them? Ika benayu de ka'asu maya basrei. Watch this. Here's an it's so exciting. Here's an afkamina. What happens if right after you dig the channel, the water comes in immediately afterwards? So watch this. Say if you know that the issue with digging the channel is that you're ready the sides ultimately for planting, that issue still is there. But if you hold that the issue of making the channels is that it looks like you're plowing, then since the water immediately fills the channel, it doesn't look like plowing. It doesn't look like hoeing. So I'll say, see the nafkamina, if the water immediately fills the channel, the issue of looking like I'm plowing does not apply because it's immediately filled with water. The issue of readying the sides for planting still applies because there's a pile of loose earth by the side of the channel. So as I understand, even according to the opinion that says that Allah Lamaisa, the problem with digging the channels, it looks like you're plowing or hoeing, why doesn't he also that there's a problem of what? Readying the sides for planting. In other words, it will say at the end of the day that concern should still be there. Halach Lamaisa, there's still loose earth by the side of the channel. Listen to this. Here's the case, Rabbi. The case, the Nafkamina case will be, you dig out the channel, but instead of placing the earth right by the side of the channel, what do you do? You throw the earth. Right? Rabbi, there are different kinds of shovelers. Like Lahavdil, you often see this by Levias, right? Right? Some people know how to put earth in a place, and some people it's everywhere. Right? You know who you are, right? Good. So we'll say, so the Gemara says like this. So the Gemara says, Here's the case. The case is where halacha lamaisa, he's not planting, he's not placing the earth right by the side of the channel, but rather it's being scattered. So the Gemara says, according to the opinion, it says that the concern is placing loose, right, zriya. Looks like you're getting ready for planting. Well, that's not going to apply. Why not? Because the loose earth has been scattered. But if you hold that the issue is that it looks like you're plowing, or I should say hoeing, that concern still applies. But 1 second, but according to the opinion who says that even though there's not a problem ultimately of readying the sides for planting, why doesn't he hold that digging a channel is also a problem? It looks like hoeing. To which the Gemara says, Oder nami kika shokel beduchte manachle. Because Rabbi say with hoeing or with plowing, the ochap of plowing and hoeing is what? You leave the earth where it is. In other words, you overturn earth, but you don't scatter earth in a distant place. Since you're scattering the earth in this situation, neither the concern for plowing nor planting applies. Incredible. So the Gemara says, so the Kika Shakal Boduchtei Manachle. Ameimar Masnila Bibnei Shnir Ka'oder. V'kashile Rabbi ben Azariah ad Rabbi ben Azariah. So ultimately, again, Ameimar said the reason you can't dig a channel on Shemitah is because it looks like you're plowing. Looks like you're plowing, hoeing, right? And therefore, again, he also raises that there's a contradiction of Rabbi ben Azariah. How so? Umi Amar Rabbi ben Azariah Kol Shnir Ka'oder Aser. Does Rabbi ben Azariah say any on Shemitah? Anything that looks like plowing is going to be asur or minhu. Both say, I'll raise a kasha. Osa adam as zivla otza. Both say, this is a fascinating case. Can you pile manure on your field on Shemitah? Can you pile manure on your field in Shemitah? So the Gemara says, Osa adam as zivla otzar. A person could go ahead, so Tanakamba says a person could go ahead and place manure in their field on Shemitah for storage purpose. Look at Rashi. Osa adam zivla otzar. Shemachnis kol zivla b'shvias besada. V'lamina dinira kim izal b'sada b'shas. So we'll say, listen to the Tanakamba says, you could pile your manure on your field on Shemitah, and it does not look like you're fertilizing your field. In other words, I just want to store it there. So you're allowed to store it there, and it doesn't look like you're fertilizing. So the Rabbi Meir says it's aser ad sheyamik shlosha tvachim or ad sheyakbia gimel tvachim. The Meir says no. In order to do that, you have to what? You have to either dig a hole 3 tvachim high, or ultimately again put it on something that is more than 3 tvachim. On both sides. Remember again, the idea Rabbi Meir says is you have to make a noticeable change that people see you're only storing the manure there. You're not actually fertilizing the field. See, that was just go another minute. See, either go ahead and dig down a little bit and place the manure in there, or put a platform or something and pile the manure on top of that. Hayelo davar muat. Most of Allah holik. But if there was already some manure there before Shemitah, then Allah you could just pile on top of that on Shemitah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah oser ad shiyamik shlosha or ad shiyagbia shlosha or ad shiyitin ala sela. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he says, Rabbi said, what's the halacha? He holds you cannot pile manure there until either you dig a hole that's 3 tefachim deep, or until you place the manure on top of something that is 3 tefachim high, or until you put it on a stone. So Rabbi say, what do you see from here? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying that in order to place manure in your field, what do you have to do? What do you have to do? We're going to finish this. What do you have to do? Right? You have to dig. Now, both say, we just Rabbi Silber and Azariah say you're allowed to dig on Shemitah? You're allowed to dig on Shemitah? No. Why not? Because it looks like you're plowing. So what's going on over here? Because Rabbi Silber and Azariah say you can't dig or you can't dig. To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Silber, Chad Amar, Kigon Shehe'emik, V'chad Amar, Ziblo Mochiach Alav. So we'll say, so 2 different interpretations. One says that halacha l'maisa, Kigon Shemik Rashi says, Kodim Lachem. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is talking about a case where what? The hole was already dug. If the hole was already dug, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah allows you to place the additional manure inside of the hole. But he wouldn't allow you to dig the hole. Or the other possibility is that there was already some manure there, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah describes the opinion that there's already manure there, you could pile additional manure on top of it on Shemitah. So therefore, Rabbi say, what comes out over here, we're going to stop over here for today, but what comes out over here is that halacha l'maisa, the issue of going ahead and digging a channel is going to be asr both on Chalamayid as well as on Shemitah. Chalamayid, we understand. Why is it asr on Chalamayid? Why asr on Chalamayid? Right, tircha yisera, too much effort. Why is it asr on Shemitah? Sihira Bo said that's a machlokis. Either because ultimately, again, it looks like plowing, right, nira ka'oder, which is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, or ultimately, again, Because halach l'maisa looks like zriya, it looks like planting or readying for planting, and ultimately we saw the nafkaminas between those cases. Also, we'll stop over here for today's shkoyach. We'll pick up at the 2 dots tomorrow. All right, Chevron on Zoom, wonderful to see everyone. Have a great day. I have an extra one for you. You don't have to buy it. I actually have a whole bunch of them.